Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast, Loving Courageous. I'm your host, Demetris. And for today's episode, I will do a part two to Project 2025. I'm going to go over a few more things that they're trying to attack in this plan. So I'm just going to read the plan word from word, but I want to get into the Department of Labor and related agencies. So in Project 2025, they want to reverse the DEI revolution in labor policy. Now, this is under the Biden administration. So, under this race, the gender ideology, every aspect of labor policy became a vehicle with which to advance sex, race, and other classifications and discriminate against conservative and religious viewpoints on these subjects and others, including pro life views. Project 2025 would eliminate every one of these ideological projects. Eliminate racial classifications and critical race theory trainings. The Biden administration pushed racial equity in every area of our national life, including in employment, and has condoned the use of racial classifications and racial preferences under the guise of DEI and critical race theory, which categorizes individuals as oppressors and victims based on race. Non discrimination and equality are the law. DEI is not. Title 7 prohibits discrimination in employment on the basis of race, color, and national origin. Now, here are a few things they're saying that the president should do. One of them is issue a executive order banning and Congress should pass a law prohibiting the federal government from using taxpayer dollars to fund all critical race theory training. Direct DOJ and EEOC to enforce Title 7. The president should direct the Department of Justice and Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to enforce Title VII to prohibit racial classifications and quotas, including human resources classifications and DEI trainings that promote critical race theory. Eliminate EEO1 data collection. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission collects EEO1 data on employment statistics based on race, ethnicity, which data can be then used to support a charge of discrimination under a disparate impact theory. This could lead to racial quotas to remedy alleged race discrimination. Cruelly, categorizing employees by race or ethnicity fails to recognize the diversity of the American workforce and forces individuals into categories that do not fully reflect their racial and ethnic heritage. Amend Title VII. The next administration should work with Congress to amend Title VII to prohibit the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission from collecting EEO1 data and any other racial classifications and employment for both private and public workplaces. Eliminate disparate impact liability. With interracial marriages in America increasing, many Americans do not fit nearly into crude racial categories under disparate impact theory. Moreover, discriminatory motive or intent is irrelevant. The outcome is what matters, but all workplaces have disparities. Now, this is the thing that they are saying that Congress should do. So, Congress should eliminate disparate impact as a valid theory of discrimination for race and other bases under Title VII and other laws. So, another thing they want the president to do is sign an executive order explicitly forbidding OLCCP from using disparate impact in its analysis. Eliminate OLCCP. The Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs exists to enforce executive order. That order was originally signed in 1965 to require federal contractors to commit to non-discrimination. It gave enforcement authority to the Department of Labor up to and including department from federal contracting. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has since grown, often making OLCCP authority redundant and imposing a second regulatory agency under those rules businesses must operate. In addition, under the EO 11246, the president and DOL can force a huge swath of American employers to comply with rules and regulations based on novel anti discrimination theories, such as gender identity theories, sexual orientation that Congress has never imposed by statute. But when it comes to sex discrimination, it says the Biden administration, LGBT advocates, and other federal courts have attempted to expand the scope and definition of sex discrimination based in part of the Supreme Court decision in Bostock versus Clayton County. Bostock held that an employer who fires someone simply for being homosexual or transgender violates Title VII prohibition against sex discrimination. The court explicitly limited its holding to the hiring firing content in Title VII and did not purport to address other Title VII issues such as bathroom, locker room, dress codes, and other laws prohibiting sex discrimination. Notably, the court focused on the status of the employees and used the term transgender status rather than the broader and another term, gender identity. So it says they're trying to restrict the application of Bostock. The new administration will restrict Bostock application of sex discrimination protections to sexual orientation and transgender status in the context of hiring and firing, withdraw unlawful notices and guidances. The president should direct agencies to withdraw unlawful notices and guidances purporting to apply Bostock reasoning broadly outside hiring and firing.
Direct agencies to refocus enforcement of sex discrimination laws. The president should direct agencies to focus their enforcement of sex discrimination laws on the biological binary meaning of sex. So when it comes to pro-life measures, promote pro-life workplace accommodations for mothers. Federal law should protect life and promote pro-family policies. The current law, Pregnancy Discrimination Act, provides non-discrimination protections in the workplace for pregnancy, childbirth, or any other related medical conditions. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act requires employers to make reasonable accommodations for women to the known limitations related to the pregnancy, childbirth, or other medical conditions, unless the accommodation would impose an undue hardship on the operation of the employer's business. The Americans with Disability Act also provides non-discrimination and accommodation protections in the workplace for a certain pregnancy-related disability. None of these laws requires an employer provide health insurance benefits for elective abortion. Also, it says, pass a law requiring equal or greater benefits for pro-life support for mothers and clarifying abortion exclusions. Congress should pass a law requiring that to the extent an employer provides employee benefits for abortion, it must provide equal or greater benefits for pregnancy, childbirth, maternity, and adoption. That law should also clarify that no employer is required to provide an accommodation or benefits for abortion. Keep anti-life benefits out of benefit plans. Some benefits attorneys and pro-choice advocates have argued since the Supreme Court Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization decision that the long-standing doctrine of Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974 preemption should block individual states' efforts to prohibit employers from helping employees procure abortions through offering various kinds of coverage under employee-sponsored benefit plans. The Employee Retirement Income Security should not be allowed to trump states' ability to protect innocent human life in the womb. Congress and DOL should clarify that Employee Retirement Income Security Act does not preempt states' power to restrict abortion, surrogacy, or other anti-life benefits. So when it comes to religion, it says provide robust protections for religious employers. America's religious diversity means that workplaces include people of many faiths and that many employers are faith-based. Nevertheless, the Biden administration has been hostile to people of faith, especially those with traditional beliefs about marriage, gender, and sexuality. The new administration should enact policies with robust respect for religious exercise in the workplace, including under the First Amendment, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, Title VII, and federal consent protection laws. Issue an executive order protecting religious employers and employees. The president should make clear through executive order that religious employers are free to run their business according to their religious beliefs. General non-discrimination laws notwithstanding, and support participation of religious employees and employers as federal contractors and in federal activities and programs. Clarify Title VII religious organization exemptions. Congress should clarify Title VII religious organization exemptions to make it more explicit that those employers may make employment decisions based on religion regardless of non-discrimination laws. Provide robust accommodations for religious employees. Title VII requires reasonable accommodations for employees' sincerely held religious beliefs, observances, or practices unless it poses an undue hardship on the employer's business. These accommodation protections also apply to issues related to marriage, gender, and sexuality. Unless the Supreme Court overrules its bad precedent, Congress should clarify that undue hardship means significant difficulty or expenses, not more than a de minimis cost, as the court has previously held. General EEOC reforms. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission does not have rulemaking authority under Title VII and other laws it enforces, yet it issues guidance, technical assistance, and other documents, including some that push new policy positions. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission should disclaim its regulatory pretensions and abide by the guidance reforms discussed below. And it says EEOC should disclaim its regulatory pretensions, affirm decision making through majority vote of commissioners. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, also known as EEOC, should affirm as policy the Title VII requirement that exercise substantive power through majority vote of commissioners, not by unilateral chair action or by delegation to staff. Disclaim power to enter into consent decrees. EEOC should disclaim power to enter into consent decrees that require employer actions that it should not require under the laws it enforces. Reorient enforcement priorities. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission should reorient its enforcement priorities towards claims of failure to accommodate disability, religion, and pregnancy, but not abortion. Now I'm going to get into the refocusing labor regulation on the good of the family. It says the DEI revolution in labor affected not only the administrative state, but it has also targeted much of the private sector. Owing to the combination of regulatory pressure and eager human resources, offices in the private sector, much of American labor and employment policy has become institutionally oriented towards woke goals. We must replace woke nonsense with a healthy vision of the role of labor policy in our society, starting with the American family. So here are things that they plan on doing. Allowing workers to accumulate paid time off. Lower middle income workers are more likely to be in jobs that are subject to overtime laws that require employers to pay time and a half for working more than 40 hours a week. Congress should enact the Working Families Flexibility Act. The Working Families Flexibility Act will allow employees in the private sector the ability to choose between receiving time and a half pay or accumulating time and a half paid time off, a choice that many public sector workers already have. For example, if an individual worked 2 hours of overtime every week for a year, this person could accumulate 4 weeks of paid time off to use for paid family leave, vacation, or any reason. Congress should incentivize on-site childcare across the spectrum of professionalized childcare options. On-site care puts the least stress on the parent-child bond. Congress should amend the Fair Labor Standards Act, also known as FLSA, to clarify that employers' expenses in providing on-site child care are not part of an employee's regular rate of pay. DOL should commit to honest study of the challenges for women in the world of professional work. The Women's Bureau at DOL tends towards a politicized research and engagement agenda that puts predetermined conclusions ahead of empirical study. The Bureau should rededicate its research budget towards open inquiry, especially to disentangle the influences on women's workforce participation and to understand the true causes of earnings gap between men and women. Okay, when it comes to equalized retirement savings assets across married household. The limit on individual contributions to a 401k or FO3B or similar work-based retirement account is $22,500 for 2023. Individuals who do not work or do not have access to a work-based retirement account can save up to $6,500 in a IRA. This individual-based system creates a disadvantage for married couples with only one spouse who works, or with two working spouses, one of whom earns less than the maximum retirement account contribution. To equalize access to tax-free retirement savings for married couples, the limit for married couples on 401k and similar work-based retirement savings accounts should be double the limit for individuals, regardless of the allocation of work between the couple. When it comes to Sabbath day, God ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest, and until very recently, the Judeo-Christian tradition sought to honor that mandate by moral and legal regulation of work on that day. Moreover, a shared day off makes it possible for families and communities to enjoy time off together, rather than as atomized individuals, and provide a healthier cadence of life for everyone. Unfortunately, that communal day of rest has eroded under the pressure of consumerism and secularism, especially for low-income families. Congress should encourage communal rest by amending the Fair Labor Standards Act, also known as FLSA, to require that workers be paid time and a half for hours worked on the Sabbath. That day would default to Sunday, except for employers with sincere religious observance of a Sabbath at a different time, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. The obligation would transfer to that period instead. Houses of worship, to the limited extent they may have, the Fair Labor Standards Act cover employees, and employers legally required to operate around the clock, such as hospitals and first responders, would be exempt, as would workers otherwise exempt from overtime. Congress should clarify that overtime for telework applies only if the employee exceeds 10 hours of work in a specific day and the total hours for the week exceed 40. DOL should clarify that employee given the option to telework need only record time if the quantity of work assigned for that day exceeds the usual amount of work the employee performs, so that the employee need not track every time the person log in or out, and the employer need not do so either. DOL should clarify that a home office is not subject to OSHA regulations, that the time to set up a home office is not commensable time or eligible for overtime calculations. DOL should likewise clarify that reimbursement for home office expenses is not part of an employee's regular rate, even if those reimbursements are repetitive, such as for internet or cell phone service. Congress should clarify that the regular rate for overtime pay is based on the salary paid rather than all benefits provided. This would enable employers to offer additional benefits to employees without fear that those benefits would dramatically increase overtime pay. Congress should provide flexibility to employers and employees to calculate the overtime period over a longer number of weeks. Specifically, employers and employees should be able to set a 2 or 4 week period over which to calculate overtime. This would give workers greater flexibility to work more hours in 1 week and fewer hours in the next week, and would not require the employer to pay them more for that same total number of hours of work during the entire period. I'm going to get into the Federal Election Commission. So, nomination authority. The president's most significant power is the appointment of the 6 commissioners who govern the FEC, subject to confirmation by the U.S. Senate. Commissioners may only serve a single term of 6 years, but because they stay in office until a new commissioner has been confirmed, many commissioners continue to serve past their terms. So here are a few things they want to do. The president, assuming that's going to be in office in 2025, must ensure if the 3 Republican commissioners do not wish to remain on the FEC past their terms, that nominees for these positions share the views of these commissioners. Also, to the extent that the president has the ability to negotiate with the Democratic Party leader in the Senate, he should try to temper any choice of the opposition party to ensure that this individual does not have extreme views on aggressive over enforcement that would severely restrict political speech and protect the party campaign and associational activities. U.S. Department of Justice and FEC related activities. The President does have control of the Department of Justice, also known as DOJ. He has authority as president primarily through his choice of attorneys general and other political appointees to direct the prosecutorial functions of the Department of Justice regarding criminal enforcement of FECA. Such investigations and prosecutions are carried out by the Public Integrity Section of the Criminal Division with the assistance, coordination, and help of the Office of U.S. Attorneys in whatever state an alleged violation occurs. The President must ensure that the Department of Justice, just like the FEC, is directed to only prosecute clear violations of FECA. The department must not construe ambiguous provisions against the public instead of the government or apply FECA in a way that infringes on protected First Amendment activity. It should be, but it's not always obvious to overzealous government prosecutors that if a federal law is confusing, it would be unjust to prosecute individuals who are unable to determine if they are violating the law. The President should direct the Department of Justice and the Attorney General not to prosecute individuals under an interpretation of the law with which the FEC, the expert agency designated by Congress to enforce the law civilly and issue regulations establishing the standards under which the law is applied, does not agree. In making prosecution decisions, the Department of Justice should be instructed to consult and consider all official actions by the FEC that interpret the law, including prior enforcement actions and regulatory pronouncements, advisory opinions, just as private practitioners, the public, and political actors must do. The President should direct the Attorney General to defend the FEC in all litigation when there is a failure of the commissioners to authorize the general counsel of the agency to defend it. No legislation would be needed to accomplish this. The Department of Justice has the general authority to defend the government and its agencies in all litigation. As a legislative matter, and given this abuse, the President should seriously consider recommending that Congress amend FECA to remove the agency independent litigating authority and rely on the Department of Justice to handle all litigation involving the FEC. There are multiple instances of existing statutory provisions of FECA and the accompanying FEC regulations have been found unlawful or unconstitutional by federal court decisions. Yet those statutory provisions remain in the U.S. Code, and the implementing regulations remain in the Code of Federal Regulations. So they continue by saying what is going to be in this little section of the project. The President should request that the commissioners on the FEC prepare such guidance. In the event that the FEC fails to act, the President should direct the Attorney General to prepare a guidance document from the Department of Justice for the public that outlines all the FECA statutory provisions and FEC regulations that have been changed, amended, or voided by specific court decisions. Legislative changes. While President's ability to make any changes at an independent agency like the FEC is limited, the President has the ability to make legislative recommendations to Congress. One of the most obvious changes that is needed is to end the current practice of allowing commissioners to remain as serving commissioners long after their term has expired, defining the clear intent of Congress and specifying that a commissioner can only serve a single term of 6 years. The President should prioritize nominations to the FEC once commissioners reach the end of their terms and should be assisted by legislative language, either eliminating or limiting overstays to a reasonable period of time to permit the vetting, nomination, and confirmation of successors. The president should vigorously oppose all efforts as proposed, for example, in Section 6002 of the For the People Act of 2021, to change the structure of the FEC to reduce the number of commissioners from 6 to 5 or another odd number. The current requirement of 4 votes to authorize an enforcement action, provide an advisory opinion, or issue regulations ensures that there is bipartisan agreement before any action is taken and protects against the FEC being used as a political weapon. The last one is raise contribution limits and index reporting requirements to inflation. Contribution limits should generally be much higher as they hamstring candidates and parties while serving no practical anti-corruption purpose, and a wide range of reporting requirements have not been indexed to inflation, clogging the public record and the FEC internal processes with small dollar information of little use to the public. So for the Department of Agriculture, here are some things they want to do. So major priority issues and specific recommendations. So proactively defend agriculture. From the outset, the next administration should denounce efforts to place ancillary issues like climate change ahead of food productivity and affordability when it comes to agriculture. Remove the U.S. from any association with UN and other efforts to push sustainable development schemes connected to food production. Defend American agriculture and advance the critical importance of efficient and innovative food production, especially to advance safe and affordable food. Stress that ideal policy should remove obstacles imposed on American farmers and individuals across the food supply chain so that they can meet the food needs of Americans. Clarify the critical importance of efficiency to food affordability and why failure to recognize this fact especially hurts low-income households who spend a disproportionate share of after-tax income on food compared to higher-income households. To accomplish these objectives, a new administration should announce its principles through an executive order. The USDA should remove all references to transforming the food system on its website and other department disseminated material, and it should expressly and regularly communicate the principles informing the objectives listed above, as well as promote these principles through legislative efforts. The USDA should also carefully review existing efforts that involved inappropriately imposing its preferred agricultural practices onto farmers. So the next administration should refrain from using Section 5 discretionary authority. The USDA can address this abuse on its own by following the lead of most administrations and not using this discretionary authority. Promote legislative fixes to address abuse. Ideally, Congress would repeal the Secretary discretionary authority under Section 5 of the Charter Act. There is no reason to maintain such authority. If Congress needs to spend money to assist farmers, it has legislative tools, including the Farm Bill and the annual appropriations process, to do so in a timely fashion. While not an ideal solution, Congress also amend the Charter Act to require prior congressional approval through duly enacted legislation before any money is spent. At a minimum, Congress should amend the Charter Act to limit spending to directly help farmers and ranchers address issues due to unforeseen events not already covered by existing programs and that constitute genuine emergencies that must be addressed immediately. Prohibit the CCC from being used to assist parties beyond farmers and ranchers. Clarify that spending is only to address problems that are temporary in nature and ensure that funding is targeted to address such problems. Tighten the discretion within Section 5 and identify ways for improper application of the Charter Act to be challenged in court. Reform farm subsidies. Too often, agriculture policy becomes synonymous with farm subsidy policy. This is unfortunate because making them synonymous fails to recognize that agricultural policy covers a wide range of issues, including issues that are outside the proper scope of the USDA, such as environmental regulation. When it comes to reforming subsidy programs, the next administration will primarily have to look to legislative solutions. The next administration should repeal the federal sugar program. The federal government should not be in the central planning business, and the sugar program is a prime example of harmful central planning. Its very purpose is to limit the sugar supply in order to increase prices. The program has a regressive effect since lower income households spend more of their money to meet food needs compared to higher income households. Ideally, repeal the ARC and PLC programs. Farmers eligible to participate in ARC or PLC are generally already able to purchase federal crop insurance. Policies that protect against shortfalls in expected revenue, whether caused by lower prices or smaller harvests. The ARC program is especially egregious because farmers are being protected from shallow losses, which is another way of saying minor dips in expected revenue. This is hardly consistent with the concept of providing a safety net to help farmers when they fall on hard times. The Congressional Budget Office, in one of its options to reduce the federal deficit, has once again identified repealing all Title I farm programs, including ARC, PLC, and the federal sugar program. Stop paying farmers twice for price and revenue losses during the same year. Farmers can receive support from the ARC or PLC programs and the federal crop insurance program to cover price declines and revenue shortfalls during the same year. Congress should prohibit this duplication by prohibiting farmers from receiving a ARC or PLC payment the same year they receive a crop insurance indemnity. Reduce the premium subsidy rate for crop insurance. On average, taxpayers cover about 60% of the premium cost for policies purchased in the federal crop insurance program. One of the most widely supported and bipartisan policy reforms is to reduce the premium subsidy that taxpayers are forced to pay. At a minimum, taxpayers should not pay more than 50% of the premium. After all, taxpayers should not have to pay more than the farmers who benefit from the crop insurance policy. CBO has found that reducing the premium subsidy to 47% will save $8.1 billion over 10 years and have little impact on crop insurance participation or on the number of covered acres. In that analysis, there will be a reduction in insured acres of just 0.5%, and only 1.5% of acres will have lower coverage levels. This reform is basically all benefit with little to no cost. In this recent release report identifying options to reduce the federal deficit, CBO found that reducing the premium subsidy to 40% would save $20.9 billion over the next 10 years. Beyond these legislative reforms, the next administration should communicate to Congress the necessity of transparency in a genuine reform process. The White House and the USD should make it very clear that the Farm Bill process, including reform of farm subsidies, must be conducted through an open process with time for markup and the opportunity for changes to be made outside the Agriculture Committee process. Separate the agricultural provisions of the Farm Bill from the nutrition provisions. To have genuine reform and proper consideration of the issues, agriculture programs should be considered in separate legislation distinct from food stamps and the nutrition part of the Farm Bill, and reauthorization of such programs should be fixed on different timelines to ensure this separation. Agriculture and nutritional programs, which are distinct from each other, have been combined together for political reasons, something which is readily admitted by proponents of this log rolling. When it comes to American agriculture and welfare programs, they deserve sound policy debates, not political tactics at the expense of thoughtful discourse. The administration want to move the USDA Food and Nutrition Program to the Department of Health and Human Services. Reform SNAP. Re-implement work requirements. The statutory language covering food stamps allows states to waive work requirements that otherwise apply to work-capable individuals. That is, adult beneficiaries between the ages 18 and 50 who are not disabled and do not have any children or other dependents in the home. FNS should implement better regulation to clarify options for states to implement the general work requirement. This requirement is an option states can apply to work-capable beneficiaries ages 16 to 59. If beneficiaries' work hours are below 30 hours a week, states can implement the general work requirements to oblige beneficiaries to register for work or participate in SNAP employment and training or workfare assigned by the state SNAP agency. Increased clarity for states would include items like states being required to offer employment and training spots for those that request them, not simply budgeting for every currently enrolled able-bodied adult. Reform broad-based categorical eligibility. Federal law permits states to enroll individuals in food stamps if they receive a benefit from another program, such as the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, also known as TANF program. However, under an administrative option in TANF called broad-based categorical eligibility, benefit is defined so broadly that it includes simply receiving distributed pamphlets and 1 through 800 numbers. This definition, with its low threshold to trigger a benefit, allow individuals to bypass eligibility limits, particularly the access requirements. Adopting the BBCE option has even allowed millionaires to enroll in the food stamp program. The Trump administration proposed to close the loophole with a rule to increase program integrity and reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. The regulation was not finalized before the end of the Trump administration. Reevaluate the Thrifty Food Plan in a dramatic overreach. The Biden administration unilaterally increased food stamp benefits by at least 23% back in October of 2021 through an update to the Thrifty Food Plan, in which the USDA analyzes a basket of foods intended to provide a nutritious diet. The USDA increased food stamp outlays by between $250 billion and $300 billion over 10 years. Although the 2018 Farm Bill instructed FNS to update the Thrifty Food Plan by 2023, and every 5 years thereafter, every previous Thrifty Food Plan has been always cost neutral. Exactly what CBO estimated as cost of the 2018 Farm Bill. Eliminate the heat and eat loophole. States can artificially boost a household food stamp benefit by using the heat and eat loophole. The amount of food stamps a household receives is based on its countable income. Income minus certain deductions. Households that receive benefits from the Low-Income Heat and Energy Assistance Program, also known as LIHEAP, are eligible for a larger utility deduction. In order to make households eligible for the higher deduction and thus for greater food stamp benefits, states have distributed LIHEAP checks for amounts as small as $1 to food stamp recipients. Reform WIC. Turning to WIC, this program distributes money through EBT cards to help low-income women, infants, and children under 6 purchase nutrition-rich foods and nutrition education. As of August 2022, approximately 6.3 million people participate in WIC each month to purchase food. In 2021, WIC federal outlays were $5 billion. The next administration should reform the state voucher system. State agencies control WIC costs by approving only one brand of infant formula through competitive bidding for infant formula rebate contracts, because 50% of baby formulas is purchased through the federal WIC program. It is vital that regulation for these competitive bidding contracts does not unintentionally create monopolies. Reevaluate excessive regulation. As for baby formula regulations, generally labeling regulations and regulations that unnecessarily delay the manufacture and sale of baby formula should be reevaluated during the Biden administration. There have been devastating baby formula shortages. Return to the original purpose of school meals. Federal meal programs for kindergarten through 12th grade students were created to provide food to children from low-income families while at school. Now, however, federal school meals increasingly resemble entitlement programs that have strayed far from their original objective and represent an example of the ever-expanding federal food footprint and local school operations. So, what the administration wants to do is work with lawmakers to eliminate CEP. The NSLP and SBP should be directed to serve children in need, not become an entitlement for students from middle and upper income homes. Congress should eliminate CEP. Further, the USDA should not provide meals to students during the summer unless students are taking summer school classes. Currently, students can get meals from schools even if they are not in summer school, which has in effect turned school meals to a federal catering program. Promulgate a rule properly interpreting CEP. The USDA should issue a rule that clarifies that only an individual school or a school district as a whole, not a subset of schools within a district, must meet the 40% criteria to be eligible for CEP. Education officials should be prohibited from grouping schools together. Restore programs to their original intent and reject efforts to create universal free school meals. The USDA should work with lawmakers to restore NSLP and SBP to their original goal of providing food to kindergarten through 12th grade students who otherwise would not have food to eat while at school. Reform conservative programs. Farmers in general are excellent stewards of the land, if not for moral or ethical considerations, then out of self-interest to make sure their land and by extension their livelihoods remain intact. Farmers are often called the original conservationists. So here are a few other things they want to do. So 1, eliminate or reform marketing orders or checkoff programs. Reduce the number and scope of marketing orders and checkoff programs. Work with Congress to eliminate marketing orders and checkoff programs. Focus on trade policy, not trade promotion. Remove obstacles for agricultural biotechnology. Reform Forest Service wildfire management. Eliminate or reform the dietary guidelines. The last one I'm going to get into is when it comes to Small Business Administration. So 1, the SBA in a conservative administration. So this is what would happen if this was the case. A highly qualified SBA administrator and leadership team that can competently run the agency and enthusiastically advocate for the policy issues and needs for small business owners and entrepreneurs. A tighter, more focused SBA that concentrates on congressionally authorized programs. An accountable SBA administrator and staff who report regularly to Congress, respond on a timely basis to requests from individual members of Congress, and satisfactorily implement or respond to IG and GAO recommendations. A full accounting of and end to waste, fraud, and abuse in all COVID-19 relief programs, including the PPP and EIDL programs. An action that follows the rule of law by ensuring that loan recipients who are not eligible for loan forgiveness or who falsify loan applications either pay back the funds or are referred to law enforcement. An end to SBA direct lending, an approach to small business lending and capital programs that supports a resilient small business supply chain. For example, by financing technological upgrades and capital expenditures. Outreach to all small businesses and those are eligible for program support across sectors and geographic areas through congressionally authorized programs and collaboration with partners and business associations. The SBA could use the latest technology and platforms to implement relevant initiatives to reach small businesses. Programs would be non-duplicative and implemented on a first-come, first-served basis. An Office of Advocacy that is strengthened by a renewed mandate and additional resources to protect against overregulation, along with a research agenda that includes measuring the total cost that federal regulation imposes on small businesses. Accountability and managerial practice. The SBA lacks accountability and managerial practices to measure the effectiveness, success, and integrity of its various programs as a future administration evaluates agency structure and the particulars of how the SBA is spending appropriate funds. It should immediately require actions and procedures to compel a culture of accountability and performance. Specifically, require performance metrics and internal procedures to safeguard taxpayer dollars and program integrity. In October 2022, IG report failure to adopt procedures that would reliably capture data and information for various programs, coupled with significant challenges and weaknesses regarding IT investments, systems development, and security controls, presents significant risk to program integrity and increased risk of waste, fraud, and abuse. Addressing these shortcomings and risks should be a priority challenge and action item for the next administration. As underscored by the Inspector General in his introduction to the report, pandemic response has in many instances magnified the challenging systemic issues in SBA's mission-related work. Review all internal government watchdog recommendations and require that SBA management implement or address outstanding and ongoing OIG and GAO recommendations within a specified time frame, normally within 90 days of a recommendation and on an ongoing basis. Strengthening the Office of Advocacy. The SBA Office of Advocacy is an independent office within the SBA. It accounts for about 1/1000th of SBA spending and 0.75% of SBA personnel. Under the Regulatory Flexibility Act, both under its current authority and with suggested reforms, the Office of Advocacy could be a powerful weapon against the administrative state's regulatory extremism. Increase the Office of Advocacy budget by at least 50%, which is $4.6 million. This will allow advocacy to hire approximately 25 attorneys, economists, and scientists and enhance its role in the regulatory process. Explicitly direct federal agencies to comply with the RFA. This would be similar to the approach adopted by President Trump when he was in office. Executive orders direct the agencies to relieve the cost and burden of regulation on businesses. Advocacy could organize regional roundtables and on-site small business visits and a online platform to hear directly from small businesses and entities as it did from June 2017 through September 2018. This activity produced 26 letters to federal agencies and highlighted specific regulations that need reform and how Congress had addressed the most burdensome rules through the Congressional Review Act. COVID-19 lending program accountability and cleanup. A major immediate priority for the next administration would be a final accounting and accelerated cleanup of fraudulent COVID-19 loan and grant activity. As noted by the SBA IG, managing COVID-19 stimulus lending is the greatest overall challenge facing SBA, and it may likely continue to be for many years as the agency grapples with fraud in the programs. The next administration should consider bringing in private sector support and expertise to close out these programs. Forgiveness and fraud must be dealt with as swiftly as possible, and law enforcement officials must pursue fraud vigorously. Entities receiving PPP loans that did not meet eligibility for forgiveness but must be required to pay back the money. Disaster loan program and direct lending. The SBA disaster loan program provides low-interest loans to personal, business, nonprofit borrowers following a federally declared disaster. The program suffers from the problem of coordination with Federal Emergency Management Administration disaster assistance, also known as FEMA. For example, the disaster relief applicants have an incentive to avoid being approved for SBA disaster loans in order to increase the amount of FEMA assistance for which they are eligible. Moreover, the availability of disaster loans reduces individuals' incentives to purchase disaster-related insurance. More than 90% of SBA disaster loans are loans to individuals such as homeowners, not small businesses. In the view of the challenges the SBA has experienced in its administration of this program, as well as the fraud and abuse in the EIDL COVID-19 related program, and the IG concern that the systemic problems within this lending program undermine the SBA work. So the administration should work with Congress to assess the extent to which disaster loans should be offered by another agency rather than the SBA, and explore private sector channels for administering the loans. Specify clearly that no direct lending programs will be developed at the SBA. So that's all for today. I will drop a PDF link below for anybody that wants to read the rest, because I did not go over all of it. I just went through most of the stuff that was in there. So if anybody wants to, you can. But for my next episode, I will be speaking about the high school mass shooting that happened in Georgia. So thank you everyone for listening to my podcast, and I hope y'all have a lovely day.